Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome.
In our top story, Jerusalem has announced a major deal to create a multinational economic corridor connecting Europe and Asia. The Jewish state is at the center of this unprecedented international project, which will connect infrastructures between the continents. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the massive ports and railroad deal, which will run from India to Europe by way of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. This new gateway will be Israel's largest infrastructure project to date and will involve the laying of cables for electricity and digital connectivity, as well as a pipeline for clean hydrogen exports. It will bridge 2 harbors across 2 continents, simplifying trade, the export of clean energy, and expand access to reliable electricity.
Israel dispatched search and rescue teams along with humanitarian aid organizations to Morocco after a devastating earthquake rocked the North African country. More than 3,000 people were killed and hundreds were injured when a 6.8 tremor shook the city of Marrakesh and surrounding areas. Israel's foreign ministry sent a delegation to assist the nearly 500 Israelis in Morocco. Jerusalem also extended its offer to help Rabat in any way possible. A medical team from United Hatzalah was on the ground providing assistance just hours after the deadly quake struck. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement saying the people of Israel extend their hand to the people of Morocco at this difficult time and pray for their well-being.
A team of Israeli diplomats led by the head of Israel's Antiquities Authority became the first ever official Israeli delegation to visit Saudi Arabia. The group was in Riyadh for a meeting of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization's World Heritage Committee. The oil-rich Gulf state does not hold formal ties with Israel, but it did sign the official host party agreement, pledging to allow all signatories to attend the World Heritage Convention, including Israel.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is gearing up for his trip to the United States, where he will address the United Nations General Assembly. The Prime Minister is slated to depart the Jewish state after the high holiday of Rosh Hashanah and travel to San Francisco, where he will tour Silicon Valley. He will then make his way to New York City for the UN gathering. U.S. President Joe Biden has reluctantly agreed to an informal meeting with Netanyahu on the sidelines of the General Assembly. This comes after 7 months of waiting for an official invitation to the White House. Experts view this snub by the Biden administration as a huge shift in U.S. policy toward its greatest ally, Israel.
Dozens of world leaders have come out against the anti-Semitic remarks made by PA leader Mahmoud Abbas in an address he delivered to the Fatah Revolutionary Council. The speech, given in Arabic, was translated and republished in English, causing shockwaves in the international community for its vile lies and hate speech against the Jews. The terror leader is a serial Holocaust denier. He wrote a book claiming that the Jewish genocide was greatly exaggerated and that Zionists colluded with the Nazis. He said that Ashkenazi Jews are not Semites, they do not originate from the Middle East, and their profession as moneylenders cause hatred against them, leading to the Holocaust. These recent statements prompted condemnation from American, EU, Flemish, Belgian, German, and French leaders. The mayor of Paris was so offended that she revoked the Medal of Honor given to the terror leader in 2015. Anne Hidalgo penned a letter explaining that Abbas's statements are contrary to the universal values of the citizens of Paris and the historical truth of the Holocaust, and she declared him unworthy of the highest distinction of Paris.
Team Israel won big at the International Under-17 Flag Football European Championships in Italy. This huge win came despite the Israeli team having to forfeit a major game that conflicted with the observance of the Jewish Sabbath. American football has become wildly popular in Israel, and Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, has invested heavily in a football program for Israeli youth. He also funded the construction of 3 regulation football fields in Jerusalem.
The head of Israel's Mossad has revealed that at least 27 Iranian terror plots to murder Jews were thwarted this year. According to Mossad Director David Barnea, the attempted attacks targeted Jews all over the world. Barnea noted that this terror campaign is being directed by Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and he warned the Iranian leadership that their aggression towards Jews worldwide has made them a target. He said any harm to Israelis or Jews in any way would lead to an Israeli response, which will reach the highest echelons of the Iranian government.
The Israeli Ministry of Defense has officially placed its order for a new squadron of F-35 stealth fighter jets from defense giant Lockheed Martin. The 25 advanced aircraft will cost an estimated $3 billion and are part of the U.S. military aid package to Israel. The first 3 warplanes are set to be delivered in 2027, and 3 more are scheduled to be delivered each year, bringing the Israeli Air Force's arsenal to a total of 75 of these top-of-the-line stealth jets. Israel's Elbit technology will equip the fighter planes with displays as well as state-of-the-art helmets, which will provide pilots with advanced capabilities.
4 murals commemorating the struggle for women's rights in Iran have been unveiled throughout Israel. The Women, Life, Freedom frescoes were presented in honor of the 1-year anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini, who was beaten to death by Iran's morality police. The paintings also honor over 1,000 Iranians who died or were imprisoned by the regime in the protests following her murder. The powerful murals installed in the Israeli cities of Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Mevaseret Zion were created by Iranian-American filmmaker Houman Khalili. He explained that the paintings are meant to remind us of the pervasive injustice faced by the citizens of Iran every single day.
The Israel Allies Foundation has launched its 53rd Israel Allies Caucus in the Parliament of Moldova. The official inauguration of the Moldova Parliamentary Israel Allies Caucus was attended by members of parliament from 4 different political parties, as well as Josh Reinstein, the president of the Israel Allies Foundation. The caucus members reiterated their commitment to support the State of Israel, its capital Jerusalem, and Israel's right to exist within secure borders. They also pledged to fight anti-Semitism and the anti-Jewish boycott, divest, and sanction movement. IAF President Josh Reinstein praised the inclusion of the Moldovan parliament into the network of Israel Allies caucuses around the world. He said by joining the IAF family, these Moldovan leaders are now connected to an international network of over 1,500 parliamentarians who share their commitment to support Israel through our Judeo-Christian values. He stressed that together we will work on translating biblical support for Israel into real political action.
Archaeologists excavating at the Pool of Siloam have uncovered the steps where Christians believe that Jesus healed a blind man. Reverend Johnny Moore, the president of the Congress of Christian Leaders, told Fox News that this discovery affirms Israel's unquestionable and unrivaled link to Jerusalem. He said this find is undeniable proof of the Bible and its people Israel. The City of David and the Israel Antiquities Authority announced their plans to open the Pool of Siloam to the public for the first time in over 2,000 years.
Jews around the world are celebrating the biblical New Year of Rosh Hashanah. The High Holy Days began Friday night at sundown, marking the start of the Jewish New Year, 5784. This 2-day holiday is the beginning of the period known as the Days of Awe, commencing on the first day of the Hebrew month of Tishrei. Hundreds of thousands of Jews have gathered daily at Jerusalem's ancient Western Wall, as well as in synagogues throughout Israel to recite the traditional Slichot prayers of repentance, held between midnight and sunrise on the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah.
The central theme of this 2-day holiday is the recognition of God as King and Creator. It also begins a 10-day period of repentance known as Teshuvah, turning towards God and away from sin. These days are characterized by additional prayers, repentance, and the giving of charity. Customary traditions on Rosh Hashanah include the sounding of the shofar or ram's horn 100 times, as well as eating of symbolic foods such as apples dipped in honey to symbolize a sweet new year. We here at Israel Now News wish all of our viewers a wonderful year of health, happiness, and peace. Shana Tova.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Michael Oren. He's the former ambassador to America and prolific author here in Israel. Michael, thank you for being on the show.
Good to be with you, Josh.
So, Michael, I'm a big fan of your books. I just read Ally, and now you're working on a new project called 2048. Can you tell us about it?
2048 actually began after I came back from Washington. I was a member of Knesset. I was the deputy to the prime minister. And in a conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu, we both lamented the fact that Israel is so bogged down in its current crises that we never have a chance to think about our future. And I suggested that we establish a commission to examine Israel on its 100th birthday, 2048. In every aspect, foreign policy, domestic policy, social, educational policy, and our relations with the Christian world, with the Jewish world. And we began to work on this project, but then, of course, the government fell. I then joined with my good friend Natan Sharansky, who I know you know, at the Hartman Center. We had a year of discussions on Israel's future. It was great. Corona hit. When Corona hit, I retreated, as so many Israelis did, to my office, and I wrote the book 2048. And once I started writing, I couldn't stop. The book has now come out in Hebrew, in English, and in Arabic. It's got 22 chapters in it, each one dealing with a different aspect of my vision for 2048. But the idea is to engage Israelis, and not just Israelis, Israeli supporters around the world, in a debate about what our future should be. And no one has to accept my vision. But they could actually reject my vision, even violently reject my vision. But the idea is to get us talking about our future, because if we don't talk about our future, we won't be able to meet those challenges.
You know, you have been a big proponent of Christian support for Israel. You're a member of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus when you're a member of Knesset, and you wrote the book Ally, talking about our allies around the world. What role do they have in the next 25 years getting us to 2048?
I think it's more of a mutual role. I've been proud to be involved in the organization Passages, which brings young evangelicals to Israel. And I think that Israel has a role also in strengthening evangelical communities around the world. And evangelical communities have a role in strengthening the state of Israel, security-wise, explaining us to the world. Right now, we have to deal with charges that this country is becoming less democratic. I don't think it's becoming less democratic. The democracy may change, because democracy can mean many things. But explaining that this country remains fiercely democratic. I would say flagrantly democratic, and that's why people are out in the street protesting. That couldn't happen in a fascist country. That we are a strong society, a resilient society, and we are a Christian-friendly society. And this is one of the hardest messages I had to get out, both as ambassador and as a deputy minister in charge of diplomacy, that this is the only country in the Middle East where the Christian population is not only not disappearing, but growing very rapidly. It's the only country in the Middle East where Christians can practice their faith openly, and it's the only country in the Middle East which welcomes Christians here and feels that we share a very deep historic and spiritual bond between us.
You had a very tough job being the ambassador for Israel and the United States under the Obama administration, but it seems like the current ambassador is having even a harder time under the Biden administration. You see the reemergence of the Iran deal. You see $1 billion going to the PA, terrorism going off the charts in the last year. Why do you think that this new administration is falling into some of the traps of the past ones?
I don't think it's actually, with all due respect, that I have great regard and affection for our ambassador, for Mike Herzog, an old friend. I beg to say that my job was a little bit harder. America was a much stronger position back then. When Barack Obama spoke, the world listened. And when Barack Obama said not a brick on a brick in terms of Jewish building in Judea and Samaria, people here were scared. Today, with all due respect to Joe Biden, and I know him quite well, and had a very excellent working relationship with him, he says not a brick on a brick, and no one's going to pay much attention here. And the architect of America's Iran policy was Obama, not Biden. He's just following up on it. And the sense that Israel can be condemned and isolated, which was the message that came out of Washington. It was Secretary of State John Kerry who would say over and over again, if Israel doesn't agree to a two-state solution, it will be isolated and isolated on steroids. Okay, we know that was completely wrong, that we haven't agreed to a two-state solution, and we are less isolated today than any time of our history, very much so. But what is the message of that? The message is if Israel doesn't do what we in America say, everybody isolate Israel. All right. My good friend Jeff Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic, likened it to a mafia don coming to someone saying, "It's a nice house here. Shame if something was going to happen to it," right? That's what it was like. And that's a quote from Jeff, not from me. It was tougher back then. Our biggest problem, and I say this without reservation, our biggest problem is not having a president who is critical of us. I would rather have a president who's critical of the state of Israel, but who is willing to project American power around the world, unreservedly, unabashedly, unapologetically, than have a president who wakes up in the morning and sings Hatikva, but doesn't project power. Because Israel's greatest interest vis-a-vis the United States is having a strong America that people respect, frankly, that people fear, and an America that is willing to fulfill its role as leader of the free world.
Michael, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
The people of faith who are watching this program, I'm a person of great faith, and we know that there can be very difficult times in history for the Jewish people, and we're now marking the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, a very trying, difficult period, tragic period from Israel. We got over it, we recovered. Israel now is going through a difficult period. The faith helps us overcome these challenges, as we've overcome them not just since the creation of the State of Israel, but throughout 4,000 years of Jewish history. So maintain your faith. We'll maintain our faith. And we will reach not only the 100th anniversary of Israel in 2048, but far, far beyond that. And thank you all for your support.
Thank you, Michael, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, wishing you a happy Jewish New Year. Rosh Hashanah Sameach. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the truth from Zion.
It's one of the oldest empires in the world, but it's been through many changes in modern history. Iran has gone from a global powerhouse to an isolated country. How did we get here? The Iranian Revolution changed the country's society virtually overnight when the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps overthrew the government of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi in 1979. Pahlavi was the last Shah of the imperial state of Iran. The term Shah is used as a royal title. He ruled the nation for nearly 38 years, from 1941 to 1979.
The Shah's new government appears determined to press ahead with liberal reform.
Despite the fact that Pahlavi's reign brought Iranian society to new heights, giving opportunity to women and eradicating norms like teenage marriage, many were desperate for change. The monarchy was accused of corruption, human rights abuse, and most prominently, economic inequality. Tragically, the people did not realize that those who would replace the Shah would ultimately make their lives much worse. By 1977, many Iranians had become dissatisfied with the Shah, calling him a repressive dictator. At this time, Iran had an oil boom, and the general public argued that the wealth was not fairly distributed. In the fall of 1978, civil servants walked off the job, followed by a crippling strike from oil workers.
Almost 40,000 refinery workers went on strike today, virtually cutting off Iran's petroleum exports.
The oil strikes cost Iran some $60 million per day. Protesters demanded a more Muslim way of life.
University students demonstrating in Tehran, shouting death to the Shah, pledge allegiance to the Islamic movement of the Ayatollahs.
A key figure in the revolution emerged from the sidelines. Though he had followers for decades, religious leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini grew in popularity at this time. By the end of the 1970s, he was the symbol of opposition to the Shah's regime.
It is from the mosques that opposition to the Shah is being led by puritanical Shiite Muslims. The religious zealots want to return to the Constitution of 1906, which would ensure all legislation conforms with Islamic law.
In January 1979, the Shah was forced to flee the country. Former Egyptian President Anwar Sadat offered him asylum. The Shah died of cancer in the city of Cairo a year later. When the Shah left, Ayatollah Khomeini returned. He too had been exiled over his anti-Shah public expressions and for inciting riots in the street. Upon his return, he established the Islamic Republic. Khomeini and his supporters decided to create a new way of life for Iran. They combined religious principles from the Quran with governance. This would grow and impact the lives of everyone in the nation, especially women and the people of other faiths. With the takeover now complete, Khomeini became the supreme leader of Iran. The United States had been supporters of the Shah's regime, but were wary of an Islamic state in Iran.
The American embassy in Tehran is in the hands of Muslim students tonight. Spurred on by an anti-American speech by the Ayatollah Khomeini, they stormed the embassy, fought the Marine Guards for 3 hours, overpowered them, and took dozens of American hostages.
Washington hoped to use diplomacy to free the hostages, but to no avail. The U.S. then tried to stage a rescue by helicopter, but 2 of the 8 aircraft malfunctioned on the way to Iran, and another broke down at the rendezvous site. One of the helicopters in the fleet collided with a support plane, and 8 service members were killed. Their bodies were picked up by Iranians and paraded through the streets of Tehran in front of TV cameras. The revolution brought about many negative changes in Iranian society. Women lost their rights, and Islamic law was implemented. This led to human rights violations and the suppression of political dissent, which continues to be a concern today as women fight courageously in the streets for their right not to wear the hijab, which is a headscarf and a sign of modesty in Islam. Today, Iran does not have diplomatic ties with the United States and many other Western countries. The country works closely, though, with China, Russia, and Syria. Life in Iran is controlled by religious zealots, with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei running the show.
Iran under the Ayatollahs faces severe decline due to corruption, drug issues, air pollution, and neglect of public welfare.
Iran is a pariah state, leaving many of its citizens dreaming of a day when it will realize past glories. And now, shining light from Israel.
The Golan Heights stretches roughly about 700 square miles, but its topography changes greatly. In the north, you have Mount Hermon, which rises up about 10,000 feet above sea level. Right in the heart of the Golan Heights, in its capital, in the city of Katzrin, is one of 12 Talmudic villages that has been discovered here in this beautiful volcanic plateau. The Talmudic period in Judaism is defined as the period in which the oral tradition that was given to Moses on top of Mount Sinai, at the same time as the written Torah, was codified and written down on a piece of parchment. Here in the Talmudic village of Katzrin, unlike in a museum, one can actually touch the antiquity. Walk through the homes in which man lived over 1,500 years ago. Notice where the windows are placed and the entranceways to their homes, the ladder which led up to the bedroom. Even here in the dining room, where I'm sitting right now, the food was elevated above ground. Why? So all of these questions can be answered while you explore the ancient Talmudic village here in the city of Katzrin. Another great way to interact with the history here is to discover the tools that they use to build their homes, from the hammer and chisel to the pulley systems that they use to lift these heavy basalt stones. One of the predominant trees is the olive, and this is because the Golan Heights has the perfect climate for growing olives. And in ancient Golan, they produced a tremendous amount of olive oil. And there were several olive presses discovered here. This happens to be one of them. And how was the olive oil produced? Well, they would take their freshly picked olives, and then either somebody, like a human, or a beast of burden would push this around, crushing those olives, extracting the olive oil. Of course, this was the first press. The second press is they would fill up these baskets with the sludge, with the remnant of the first crushing, and they would stick it underneath the press over here. And then with a system of pulleys and weights, they would crush that and you'd have the second pressing. And then last but not least, in order to make sure that they get every bit of oil out of that olive, they would take the baskets and they would put it underneath this press, and again, really, really, really tightly, they would twist this all the way down, squeezing those olives to the maximum possible, extracting the last drop of olive oil. And the best part about this place is everything you see here is completely interactive. Let's go visit one of the modern olive producers here in the Golan Heights, Olea Essence. So we saw how they pressed olives in ancient times. Well, with modern Israeli innovation, we've been able to maximize what we're able to do with the olive, both in extracting its oil, but also using its refuse, which at one time was considered to be toxic. Here at Olea Essence, they've taken that toxic refuse and developed a line of cosmetic products that is world renowned. And the best part about coming here is that you get to try the product and taste the olive oil. There are so many activities that tourists can do here in the Golan Heights besides visiting the ancient sites. Many families enjoy going on ATV tours, hiking through the most pristine valleys with gorgeous waterfalls and an abundant amount of wildlife.
I hope on your next travels through the Holy Land, you'll make a point to visit Katzrin.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.